Hi, everybody. Welcome. We are streaming out across social media with a little interview just to get some reaction to the government guidance that was released today around mobile phones in schools. And I'm joined by Andrew O'Neill, who is an award-winning head teacher and has joined me for a short conversation to maybe get his reaction to that guidance being released. Just for anybody watching sort of internationally or whatever who doesn't know what we're talking about, this was guidance released by the government today about mobile phone use in schools. The sum of it is that it's non-statutory guidance saying that schools should ban mobile phones and staff shouldn't use mobile phones for personal use in front of or around students. Lots more to it than that, but that's the crux of it. Andrew, do you want to give me your reaction to it from today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start. I think your summary there is great. You know, it is non-statutory guidance. I think that the media headlines around it have been quite misleading around increased powers from government, because that's actually not true. It's really just saying that the government will support schools with behaviour policies around banning mobile phones. You could do that anyway, and I think most schools that I've encountered, every school I've worked in, have banned mobile phones within the school environment, myself included. When I became the head here, we stopped children from using mobile phones. It was a massive thing at the time. It took a great amount of sort of resilience and leadership to hold steadfastly to ensure that those standards were maintained. But I just don't think. I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre. I would say that this morning it's been the most amount of social media, ironically, on a mobile phone I've seen from the DfE and the Secretary of State on any kind of policy in the last 14 years. And it's not a policy, it's non-statutory guidance, but it's had the biggest fanfare I've ever seen, and yet most schools are doing it or attempting to do it anyway. So I find that
why do you
really
think that is? Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, if you look in Parliament at present, they scrapped the schools bill a year ago. There's currently no education legislation passing through Parliament, which I find bizarre. And then, today, at the same time that they've announced this, this non-statutory guidance to great fanfare, I mean, what other non-statutory guidance gets this amount of coverage? They've also rejected, DfE and Secretary of State have rejected the call from the Lords to reform the Progress 8 measures. So a measure that currently is, quite unfair on schools that have high levels of free school meals, disadvantaged SEN, and almost works against them. They're rejecting calls to make a fairer accountability measure. So I find it a really, really bizarre thing to do. I think what I'd rather have seen government working on is actually tackling the issue, which is the social media platforms that kids use. And it's by and large, we've had a mobile phone ban in my school for 8 years since I became the head here. We still deal with issues, and the issues are happening when the children go home of an evening and they spend hours on their devices, completely and utterly unsupervised, unregulated, and we're picking up and spending lots and lots of school time dealing with safeguarding issues, bullying issues, behaviour issues. Banning them in schools is already happening, but is not going to tackle that fundamental safeguarding issue.
Do you think that, just mentioning the social media companies and social media sites, do you agree then with the mother of Brianna Gay, who said that she wanted social media sites to essentially be banned for under a certain age group? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think that that is sort of, if you like, taking responsibility away from maybe the individuals or the parents or whoever it is to do that? Or do you think actually this is what needs to happen? We need a ban on under 13s or whatever age it would be using social media sites.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, I exist in a time pre smartphones, and then post the post smartphone era, I suppose. And you know, if I look at what, as a senior leader in those times, and then a head teacher, the amount of time and school resource that's taken up dealing with really complex issues that have originated when children go home from school. And currently, I think, you know, I think about when I go to school. I don't want to hark back to the good old days as if they were somehow better, but you could retreat from the day. Whereas now you can't retreat from the day. You go home and you're still on show, and you have to have a presence. And there's a sort of norm amongst your peers that you have to be on, you know, a particular app and producing content in a particular way. It's extremely sort of vain. It's not keeping children safe. And you know what happened to Brianna Gay was like unbelievable and in the extreme. But sort of the micro bullying, or just straight up bullying, is happening every single day, every evening when children are at home, which is supposed to be a safe place. So something has to happen around the legislation here to keep children safe, if we are serious when we say that safeguarding is paramount in schools and in society.
I mean, do you think that the government, what if you'd have changed what was announced today on mobile phones, how would you have changed it to make it better?
Well, I mean, that's quite a difficult question to sort of answer, because in my current context, what they've announced on paper is already happening. You know, we're already doing it. I can't think of a single school in my local authority or in surrounding local authorities that don't have ban on phones. I think the real issue is, and seeing some of the sort of stuff on Twitter about behaviour, it is really difficult for senior leaders in schools and in some schools to enforce, but you have to hold the line. And it's supporting, I think, schools where there are complaints about when you do ban a mobile phone currently. So, sorry, where you confiscate a mobile phone, I should say. Because the amounts of abuse that I've received down the years, or my senior colleagues or heads of year at school, where they've, you know, confiscated a phone because that was already in the confiscation guidance. You could do it if you had it as a banned item. You know, it's more support to head teachers where we face, and it's becoming more prevalent, abuse from parents, treating the teaching professional almost like it's customer service and that the customer is always right, rather than actually we are a fundamental part of the functioning of society and the upbringing of children.
When you say it's become more prevalent, do you think that that's as a result of or linked to social media, mobile phones, or do you think that is a societal problem that has always existed but is getting worse? You know, what you said, it's more prevalent. What's the reason for that? How does that actually, because you've just come from the playground, you said, so how's that sort of, how is that translating into your day-to-day job in terms of that becoming more prevalent?
Yeah, so I think pre-pandemic there were always these issues, and I know that when I started here in 2016, and it was like, no, if your phone is out, it's confiscated. You know, we'd have almost like protests outside the school from children and parents like wanting their phones back, and we held the line. So that existed pre-pandemic, and there was the sort of abuse. Why that happens? Well, I do think to some degree, increasingly, and you know, there's been lots of debate on this about social media as well, that teenagers rely on these devices so heavily. And I think to some degree, if we're going to be brutally honest, parents rely on them to some degree to occupy their children of an evening. And, you know, it's cheaper to buy them a device than pay for their child to go to a sports club, because they may not have the means or the funds to do that. And therefore, it's a strategy that parents have. So when you take that away, well, then you're in the firing line for the abuse. So it is really complicated. I think post-pandemic, it's definitely got worse because we became a society completely reliant on devices just to work, to access our learning. And we've come out the back of it and we've become more addicted to them, and they're a habitual part of our lives. But that's not necessarily a good thing for the development of young people, particularly the development of friendship groups and socializing. We've seen a drop in attendance, which is a bigger national crisis than this. But I think to some degree it plays into the same thing, because we've got children potentially at home saying, well, if I'm at home, I can still access learning from home and use my device to do so. So there is a bit of a circular pattern to this that we need to break and sort out. But this guidance doesn't really tackle that or even acknowledge some of those issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, Andrew, I know you've got a busy day ahead, so I'm going to let you go. But thank you ever so much for joining me. Really, really appreciate that.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously been a big day in terms of this guidance being released. If you've got any feedback or reaction to it, then please tweet us at TT Radio Official. If you've got a reaction to this interview, then just reply in the comments on wherever you're watching it, LinkedIn or Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever it is, and we will we'll try and reply. Obviously, we might talk a little bit more about this week on TTR. We've got shows all week coming up. And this show was brought to you with John Catt Educational as well. So if you want to find out a little bit more about the professional development opportunities available through John Catt, visit them at johncattbookshop.com. And yeah, keep in touch on socials, and we'll be back soon via TT.